My name's Russell Spatz. I'm an alcoholic.
Russell.
This month I'll have 44 years of undetected drinking, so they're never going to catch me. So I'm here to repair the damage Peter did over the last 12 weeks. And I see Pat Rogan's here. I see a lot of guys. You know, I used to do this every year. I do this series. And now it's like a year and a half or something like that. They try to make sure enough time goes by so that people forget. You know, they call me back again to do some damage. And you know, when I first came into, did I say I was an alcoholic?
Yes, you did.
I'm senile. So you'll have to. He helps me out a lot. So in any event, I was the way this. My sponsor when I first came in. My first sponsor, I've had 4 of them and a lot of mentors, but they're all temporary, by the way, and they tend to pass away on you. But he said, you know, Russ, because I'd go to meetings, I get resentments. Well, I didn't need to be in a meeting to get resentments. I get resentments outside of meetings, in meetings, all over the place. I get resentments sitting in a room by myself watching TVs, looking at a commercial. It didn't matter. And he said, you know, Russ, you really have to let go of your expectations on stuff. Because whenever you have an expectation that things are going to happen this way, and they don't happen exactly the way you think it's going to happen, what happens? You get pissed off, you get a resentment. So you're going to have to lower your expectations, especially around alcoholics. With alcoholics, believe me, if you're an alcoholic or you're a sponsee, my expectations are somewhere below sea level. You know, I got no expectations on you. So, you know, people go in these meetings and they think, well, this is step series, and so this is the way we're going to do it. We're going to talk about the first step, and then step 2, and step 3. I'm not going to do any of that shit. So I just want to tell you that, right? I'm just going to talk about stuff. I guarantee you that by the end of this whole deal, you're going to get every step to the power of 10. But it's going to be mixed up, and you're going to have to do some work. You're going to have to. This is going to be like, anybody ever see the movie Pulp Fiction? You know how it starts like in the middle, you know, where they're in the restaurant and then it goes to the end and goes back and forth and everything like that. This is like a Pulp Fiction deal. You know what I mean? I might start in the 6th step and move over to the 3rd step and go up to 12 and all the way back there. If I had my druthers, the way I would do the first step is I say, what do you ask me at the end? He said, you're going to do the first step. And I said, I'm not going to do the first step. They're in an A meeting. It's an A meeting, right?
Yes.
They're alcoholics, right?
Yes.
Why do I fucking have to do? Why do I have to do the first step?
I think your words were let them drink.
They're here. They're alcoholics. They're here. Listen, if you're here and you don't know anything about the first step, you're not sure you did it, drink. No, you think I'm joking. I know you go to all these meetings, say don't drink, go to meetings, don't drink even if your ass falls off. We need to hear that stuff. But drink. Because I can guarantee you something. If you haven't done the first step, you will drink. I know, you know, one of the things that happens when you get past like 40 years, see, when I first came in, you think everybody stays sober. You see a sea of people like I saw you guys right here, and you say, man, everybody's staying sober. You know, nobody's drinking. Everybody's staying sober. They come in here, AA, you stay sober for the rest of your life, and you pick up your 40-year medallion and all that sort of stuff. And then as you go along, somewhere along the way, you're sitting in a meeting, and one day you hear some guy say, pick up a white chip, and I'm coming back. You hear people say, I'm coming back. And, you know, after like 3 weeks, but I'm coming back. You hear about slippers and things like that, and nothing wrong with that. You know, people do it. And then all of a sudden, one day you're sitting in a meeting, you see some guy, and he tells a story, he says something, he says, and I had 15 years and then I drank. And you say, what the fuck happened there, man? Guy had 15 years of going to meetings. And then they say, well, why'd you drink? And he says, well, I stopped going to meetings. And you believe that shit. You believe that. And it's partially true because a lot of people who stop going to meetings, and so you say to yourself this. You say, well, this is what I said. I said, well, I'm just never going to stop going to meetings. I'll never drink. I'll never stop going to meetings. And then then it occurs to you, the more you hear about guys with like 15, 20, 25 years drinking, the more it occurs to you that all those guys sat in meetings for 5, 10, 15, 20 years and heard people say, don't drink and go to meetings. Heard people say things like, they heard a million times, I drank because I stopped going to meetings. They heard that. And they probably did what I did. They probably, because one of the things I've learned is I'm an alcoholic, so I was unique, right? Nobody understands, I'm different. You don't understand. Yes, but, and then I come in here and I hear stories and I say, man, I'm just like, we're like twins. Fat, thin, black, white, doesn't matter where, people come up to you, speak at conventions, 300 people come up to you and they're fat, they're thin, they're tall, they're short, they're black, they're white, and they say things like, man, you're talking about me, and they mean it. And of course you're saying, I'm talking about me. And you start realizing that all this time you're thinking things like, well, I'm different, or they don't understand. And you finally figure out that if I had a crazy, nutty thought in my mind, you probably had it too. And then at some point in time when you lose fear of people, you stop worrying about what people think about you. And that usually happens after you have about 20 or 25 years if you're doing well. Alcoholics like this, I know you guys say, I don't give a shit what other people think about me. You ever say that? You ever tell somebody you don't give a shit what people think about you? You ever tell yourself that? You ever tell yourself, I don't give a crap what they think about me? That thought ever pierce your mind, And then you ultimately realize that people that really don't care what other people think about them never tell themselves they don't care what other people think about them. People that really don't care what other people think about them, they say things like pass the ketchup, but they don't say that shit. The only people who tell themselves they don't care what other people think about them is people that spend an inordinate amount of time worrying about whether people like them or not. And that's the real disease in Alcoholics Anonymous, because the drinking really is just a symptom of the disease. That's just not my conclusion. Well, that's my conclusion after many years of sobriety. But the big book says drinking's but a symptom. It's a hell of a symptom. It's what gets us here. But the real disease centers in our mind, not our body. And the real disease is when you're scared to pick up the phone or talk at a meeting or say anything or worried about what people think about you. Or you walk outside and say, why did I say that? Or why didn't I say that? And that's not only an AA. If you got that shit going on for you, that is the stuff you carry into the outside world. That's your whole life. The bondage. That's why they say you lose fear of people and economic insecurity. That's the disease. That's the thing that doesn't go away for 20, 30 years. Fear of people. Worrying about what people will think about you. And actually, the other obsession that you think they're actually thinking about you, they're just thinking about themselves, but you think they're thinking about you. And even the fear of economic insecurity, it's not so much fear of economic insecurity. It's not so much losing the job and being broke. It's worrying about what people will think about you if you're broke and they know you're broke. It's what people think about you if you lose your house. What are people going to think about me if this stuff happens to me? That's the reason why people don't talk about God, since that's the most important thing in Alcoholics Anonymous, period. Period, end of story. That's what it says in the big book, by the way. I don't know whether you guys read the big book. Well, you think you read it. You read the parts that you read. You didn't see the parts that you didn't read. But it says that's what this book is all. It says if a mere code of morals or a better philosophy of life would have solved our problems, we would have been sober a long time ago. But a mere code of morals, do the next right thing, good orderly direction, those are codes of morals. It's like the Ten Commandments. If they never worked for us, we had to find a power by which we could live. Not only a power by which we can drink, the power to not drink is sort of handed out like candy in here. Everybody stops drinking for a while. But the power by which you could live and experience the new freedom and be rocketed into the fourth dimension of existence and experience heaven and know peace. Many are called, but few are chosen for that deal. that's a different deal altogether. You know, you stay sober and you tell yourself you're doing great, and you spend money you don't have to buy shit you don't need to impress people you don't like. Say, why am I broke? You know, why is this happening to me? You wake up every morning, you say, if I only could get laid, if only I could have a girlfriend, if only I had a new wife, if only I had a new husband, if I only had any type of romantic relationship, if only I had a better job, if only my boss didn't treat me this way, if only, I'd be okay. And you run out and you buy stuff and you do stuff and you take stuff, and you're not drinking, you're drinking like blouses. You're drinking like suits of clothes. You're drinking about shoes. You're drinking cars. You know. I'm not my car anymore. I used to be my car. I used to be my shoes. I used to be my shirt. I used to be my weight. I used to be the scale. You know, it's all about vanity and the stuff that you can acquire and everything like that to fill that crap. You know, that's the real disease. That's the real thing. That's the thing that will ultimately get you drinking. But I drank my way into the first step, so I don't know how to explain that. I'll tell you maybe a story or two. So what's going to happen with this deal is, and I'm going to throw in mostly, I'm going to talk about stuff that I've learned. You know, one of the interesting things is, you know how they say in the big book, it says the way we get a new perspective. Now, you know about perspective. For instance, like let's say you have 5 years. And I asked you, well, let me ask something. Has your perspective on life and yourself changed since you had 1 year? You say, holy shit, yeah. Would you like to go back to 1 year? No way. So let's say you have 1 year. I say, well, let me ask something. Has your perspective changed since you had 1 month? You say, holy, yeah. Well, if you had 20 years, I'd say, well, has your perspective about yourself and life and everything else changed since you had 10 years? You say, oh, yeah. So the only difference between me and you is not that I'm smarter. As a matter of fact, I promise you I'm a lot dumber than you are. Somebody, who was it? Braden, who asked me this question? He came up to me. He says, you ever meditate? I said, yeah. He said, when? I said, when I'm not talking to you. I heard he's stealing that line or something like that. So here's what happens to me. Imagine this perspective. The only difference between me and somebody else is that I've had repeated humiliations and been crushed like a son of a bitch by the world for 44 years. You know? You've gone through it for about a year. And here's what happens at 40 years. Here's the difference. So you have guys coming up to you with 1 year or 5 years or 6 years or 9 years or 10 years or 12 years or 15 years. And my difference is I get calls from all over the world and all over the United States, and I have people come up to me who have 30 years and they're suicidal. And they're going to meetings. I have men with 20 and women with many with 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. Yeah. Time going to meetings, and they're not happy with this sobriety. You know, the big book says here and there once in a while, a former drinker says, feel better, look better, have a better time. We laugh at such salad. We know he's going to try the old game again because he's not happy with his sobriety. Soon he'll know loneliness as few do. There will come a time in every alcoholic's life where he'll have no defense against the first drink. He'll have no defense against the first thing. Think. He'll have no defense against the resentment. He'll have no defense against the fear. His only defense will come from God. You know, and they're not talking about somebody who's not going to meetings or somebody who's still drinking, has things. They're talking about people who have 5, 10, 15, 20 years of sobriety. Because you know what? They're in the fellowship of the problem. Nothing wrong with the fellowship of the problem. I spent 5, 10 years in the fellowship of the problem. Don't drink and go to meetings. Don't drink even if your ass falls off. You know, you can screw up your entire day, Russell, but if you haven't had a drink, you're a winner. And you know something? We all need that. We need the encouragement because we so easily get discouraged because we screw up all the time, and that's the deal. And we tell ourselves stupid things. Well, I'm not saying I'm not saying you're stupid. I'm talking about I'm stupid. I went through my time in AA where I would say things like I'm spiritual, not religious. I'm spiritual. We get to a point in our lives where we graduate, where we've evolved into spiritual beings. Not like those church people who go to church all the time and tie to the church and try to help other people and read the Bible. We're not like those people. We are spiritual, not religious. You know? We're so wonderful. But, you know, when you get to around 20 years and 30 years and a few years on you and you're suicidal or you're scared or you have cancer and all you got is don't drink, go to meetings, and it's 3 o'clock in the morning and the group ain't there, you know, and the 12-step room ain't there and your sponsor's not there and you're a basket case and shit is happening to you and you don't know how to get out of it and you don't even know how to talk to people about it, because how do you tell your group that you're scared shitless and you're worried and you're not happy with your sobriety and you got 15, 20 years and you know there's something wrong? It's because you're in the fellowship of the problem, because all you've been thinking about is not drinking and going to meetings. There comes a time where you have to sort of like up your game and cut the bullshit. And it's usually around the 6-step time. It's around the time where we separate the men from the boys. Because the fellowship of the problem, which is what basically most of us come in on, is a very simple fellowship to join because there's only one requirement. You guys know what the requirement is, the fellowship of the problem, don't you? And most meetings talk about the fellowship of the problem. The fellowship of the problem is a fellowship that says don't drink and go to meetings, and that's the only thing that meetings are about. Yeah, they talk a little bit about resentments here and there and all the other things that make you slip, but the bottom line is it's a fellowship where you go to it so that you don't drink. Sometimes you come in and say, I needed this meeting. You know, don't drink. And everybody's no drinking, but nobody's talking about the God thing. Nobody's talking about burn the idea into heavy alcohol, life, job or no job, money or no money. No matter what, you can stay sober if you trust God. Nobody talks about, well, they may talk about it, but they go over it once over lightly. Nobody talks about we never apologize for God. We never apologize for God. You know what that means? Do you know what that means when they say in the book, we never apologize for God? In the book, in the big book. I'm not talking out of school. It means we're never ashamed to talk about God. We never feel guilty about talking about God. Bill Wilson, after he had the white light experience and the room lit up, and he said, if there is a God, may you find it now. And a spiritual wind blew through. And he said, this is the God of the prophets. And he told the guy, the doctor there about it. He says, Bill, I have no idea what the hell's going on with you, but you want to know something? You better hang on to it because it's the realest thing you got going. And he said, I needed God, and he claimed it. And he came, and then you know what Bill says? But soon worldly clamors came into mostly within myself, and they blotted out his presence, the presence of God. And so I got down on my knees and I took the third step. You know how you take the third step? This is how you take the third step. You get down on your knees. This is according to the book. Has anybody ever done this? And you say the third step prayer. And you know what's the third step? You turn your will and your life, over to the care of God. So you get down on your knees and you say the third step prayer. And then the big book says, we have now completed the third step. Bullshit. Well, yes, you've completed the third step, but you haven't turned your will and your life over to care of God, because then you do what I did. You get off your knees and you check your bank account. You get up on your knees and you see whether you can find a man or a woman or a love interest or a car, and you worry about all the things of this world, and you're a thumb-sucking crybaby, and you go around telling other people about all your problems, and they're all material problems, and you don't think of God at all. God is like in the glove compartment of your car, or it's where the tire is, and every once in a while you take it out. You go to meetings, you hold hands, you say, Lord, but he's not the number one thing in your life. He's not the central fact, and you can't be rocking in the fourth dimension of existence or get any of this stuff, really. Permanent sobriety or anything like that. You can't do that, because the fact of the matter is, in order to be rocking in the fourth dimension of existence, you got to buy on to the great fact, and the great fact is this and nothing less than this. Nothing less than this. There are no middle of the road. So God is either everything or it's nothing. So you got to make up your mind. Is he everything in your life? Is it the most important thing in your life? Well, how could it be? Whenever you talk about it at meetings, they tell you, shut up, you're killing newcomers. How could it be when the only place you can't talk about God seriously is in an AA meeting? You can talk about resentments. You can stand up and say you're an atheist, and that's okay. Nobody's going to say anything to you. But you say anything about the Bible or God or anything like that, they'll just beat the shit out of you, which is completely opposite of what they did between 1935 and 1939. And you ought to know about that and read about that. You know why? Because our big book says, rarely have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed our path. And the path they followed had nothing to do with reading the big book. Because they said that in 1939, between 35 and 39, the books they found absolutely essential were 1 Corinthians 13, Sermon on the Mount, and the book of James. And if you ask Dr. Bob, what's this thing all about? He said, read the Bible, you find out what it's all about. And when they asked Dr. Bob what his first things first mean, he said, seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all things will be added unto you. And the reason I know that is because I read all the material, and I read all the material, and I read the material, even the stuff I don't like. And I had to do that because if I didn't do that, I become one of those guys that is suicidal in sobriety, and then I'll drink again. I had to grow up. And so you got this thing called the sixth step, which separates the men from the boys, because it separates the people that are in the fellowship of the problem from the people who are in the fellowship of the Spirit, because the only qualification for the fellowship of the problem is the desire to stop drinking. It doesn't even have to be an honest desire. They took that out. Just, you had a bad Saturday night, a bad batch of fucking ice, so what the hell? I might as well do it, Yeah, you feel like you want to stop drinking one day. Yeah, that's all you need to be in the fellowship of the problem. Fellowship of the Spirit is a whole different deal. You can find it on 164. Fellowship of the Spirit is where they say, but we won't know you. How are we going to stay sober? He says we cannot be sure. God will determine that, so your real reliance has to be on him. He will show you how to create the fellowship you crave, a spiritual fellowship, a godly fellowship, the fellowship you crave. See to it your relationship with him is right. Great events will come to pass for you and countless others. And the sixth step says the man and the woman who's doing the sixth step is being separated out, because many are called, but few are chosen. You start realizing that maybe 0.5%, 1 in 200 make over 20 years in AA. And many of those that make over 20 years are still not happy with their sobriety. You start realizing that the truth is you don't understand, because so many people come to AA meetings and we have these big conventions. You think everybody stays sober. But I'll tell you something, from where I'm standing at 44 years, so you look around between 20 years and 44, not too many people standing. I can tell you that. They're mostly chasing money, property, and prestige and looking at their bucket list. I have no bucket list. Maybe just to help one more person I can help. That deal. And I have a life. I've been married for 44 years. 4 kids, 8 grandkids, self-supporting through my own contribution most of the time, run a law office, and and that's the deal. But it says the great fact is this and nothing less. That God's got to become the central factor in your life. He's got to become the central factor in your life. And you must be convinced that he lives in your heart and mind in a way which is indeed miraculous. So why don't they talk about God in AA? Because it makes them uncomfortable, makes people uncomfortable. And so you don't talk about God. You don't hear a lot of talks like this in Alcoholics Anonymous, because people are intensely worried about if they talk about him, what will the other people think about him? Because they have that incredible sickness, but they can't possibly really do the steps, because they go to AA meetings where they think that the success is just not drinking and God is on the back burner. He's not really important. But the truth is those people don't last. They don't last, because the book says we never apologize for God. All men of faith have courage. You know what that means? That means if you have faith, you have courage. And if you don't have faith, you're a coward. And cowards don't do well in AA, and cowards don't do well in the world. Cowards don't do well in the world. All men of faith have courage. They trust their God. Instead, we let him demonstrate through our testimony what he has done for us. And once we begin to outgrow fear. So I asked my sponsor once that line up because we see things the way we see them, and sometimes we need sponsors to interpret these things for us because we don't really get it. We read something, we see, we listen, but we don't hear. We see something, but we really don't see it. We don't comprehend it. Like when I read the part of the book, it says selfishness, self-centeredness, that we think is the root of our problem. Driven by 100 form of fears, self-delusion, self-seeking, we step on the toes of others. We step on the toes of others. They retaliate, seemingly without provocation. But we've learned that we've made decisions in the past which put us in position to be hurt. So an alcoholic self will run riot, though he usually doesn't think so. So I read that. Anybody ever read that? Doesn't sound so bad. Doesn't sound so. It's almost like poetry, really. It's really poetry. Doesn't hardly even wounds me. Hardly even hurts. Doesn't even pierce the surface. Because the only way things pierce the surface with me is if they hurt. You know, on page 42 of the big book, you know, when the first 100 people, when a few people came to one of the guys in AA, and it's in page 42, he said the program is drastic. Drastic. Are you working? Do you have drastic sobriety? Bill Wilson, after he did that white light experience and gave his life to God, went to a couple of meetings, and some people laughed at him because of the God thing, and he was intensely worried about what people would think about him. So he went up to Harriet. What's her name? Harriet. What's the gal's name? Seiberling. And he said, you know, we shouldn't talk so much about God and religion. You know what Harriet told him? Oh. Harriet said, you know, Bill, the only reason you're sober is because of God. God is your only salvation. You need to stop worrying about alcoholics or pleasing alcoholics. They've been pleasing themselves all their lives. You need to worry about pleasing God, because if you don't talk about God in AA meetings, you might as well be the Rotary Club, because he's the only reason you're sober. She says, finally, Bill agreed. He always had a problem. Bill always had a problem with the God thing. That's why he wrote its Appendix 2 to apologize to all the atheists. But Dr. Bob never had a problem. He had a few slips in the beginning, but you want something? He was a real born-again guy. He was a serious. His last words to Bill Wilson, if you ever want to read the book, is he said, Bill, he said, let's not screw this thing up. Let's keep it simple. And that's why at 20 years, when Bill had 20 years, he started using LSD. I see that in AO. I'm not putting Bill down, and I'm not telling any secrets, because he wrote all about it. He wrote all about it in the essay, The Next Frontier, Emotional Sobriety. It's just most people don't know about that, because they're more interested in reading what he wrote when he had 3.5 years sobriety than when he had 20 years sobriety, and he had been through what you guys are going to go through in the next 20, 25 years if you make it. And you know what he said? He said, I got it all wrong. He started taking us. Listen, I've had so many guys that get 15, 20 years and they start feeling bad and they go to a psychiatrist and they say, well, why don't you suck on these things? Why don't you just chew on these things? Here, take a Xanax, take a Prozac, take this, that. Next thing you know, they're drinking again. Because the doctors don't know what's wrong with you. They don't know about the God thing. They don't know what's wrong with you. When the doctor hands you one of those pills, you know what he's saying? He says, I have no idea what the fuck is wrong with you. But why don't you suck on these things and leave me alone so I can deal with somebody who has a real problem? You know what I mean? Be very careful what the experts tell you. Let me tell you about an expert. His name was Dr. Young, one of the greatest psychiatrists in the world at that time, right up there with Freud and all those sort of stuff. And Roland hasn't said, not knowing the inner workings of my mind, drinking was impossible. Hard to believe, because now I'm so smart. I'm so spiritual. Nevertheless, he was drunk in 2 weeks, went up to Roland Hazard, greatest psychiatrist. He said, I don't understand what's wrong. And he says, this is what now you would think a psychiatrist would say, well, yeah, we'll try this, we'll try that, a few more treatment centers and things like that. This is what he said. He said, you have the mind of an alcoholic. You are a chronic alcoholic. You have the mind of a chronic alcoholic. I've never been able to help somebody where that state of mind exists. Never. He says, I can't help you. He says, well, isn't there any solution? He says, no. He says, well, here and there, once in a while, here and there, men like you have what's called a spiritual experience. It's some sort of phenomena. That's like a miracle, but can't be explained. They call it a phenomena. And it says, and they happen, he says, it's a God thing. Roland Hazard, Dr. Young was honest with him. That's the only thing that's going to help you. Getting laid's not going to help you. A new woman's not going to help you. A new man's not going to help you. The romance isn't going to help you. That's all we do in here is we go around the world before we get sober, being world whores, whoring ourselves for the world, doing anything to get what we want. Because what my sponsor said when I said, what about that line in the book says selfishness, self-centeredness, that poetic line? 100 forms of fear, self-delusion, self-seeking. We step on toes of others and they retaliate seemingly without provocation, but we soon realize that it's self-will. We've made decisions based upon our selfishness, only giving a crap about our selfishness, which puts us in a position to be hurt. Didn't sound so bad as I asked my sponsor. Many times you have to go, many times you have to learn about these things in alky talk. Because there's regular talk that really doesn't even pierce the skin. And you want your skin pierced. Because otherwise your skin will be pierced out there. Mm. And believe me, better to be pierced in here than pierced out there. But pierced out there involves arrest, divorce, indictment, all sorts of crap. And so I went up to my sponsor and he translated into alcohol talk. He said, Russ, what that means is that you don't give a shit about anybody except yourself. And I said, oh, I like the way they see it in the big book better. The big book better, So that's how you learn. You learn through pain, I mean, you learn through pain and listening to other people. I didn't have a story. Our stories, this goes into, my story was, it's not my fault. You don't understand. I'm different, all that stuff. And the bottom line is, how you get your story. You can't attack a guy. Well, if you're sponsoring, you can actually hit him over the head or something with some sarcasm. But generally, alcoholics don't like being told what to do. Because when you feel secretly insufficient and you're a piece of shit, then you act like you're a big shot, but you're a piece of shit. That's the voices. You know about the voices, don't you? You're driving in your car, you're in the shower lathering up, and you hear the voice. Any of you guys ever hear the voice? Oh, yeah. You're an asshole. You're a piece of shit. Who the fuck do you think you're kidding? You're never going to be okay. You're worthless. So you look around, you're in the shower to see who's saying that shit to you, and you're the only one in the shower. That's not coming from you. You know what that voice is? You know what the voice is? Let me clue you in. That's you telling you what you really think about yourself. That's why when you say, if I only had a gal, I only had a car, I only had this, I'd be okay. What you're really saying is, I'm not okay. So you go around the planet Earth sort of faking it. And the one thing that alcoholics want is, if you're an alcoholic, you're please don't reject me, alcoholic. Please love me, alcoholic. Please accept me, alcoholic. And your whole life is that. You ain't even close to having emotional sobriety. What you're doing is not drinking, and then what you do is you chase the same crap in order to make yourself feel better in AA with 20 years that you were chasing before you even stopped drinking. I'm an alcoholic because no woman, no car, no amount of money, no nothing ever worked quite as well as just a few drinks. And if it worked for me the way it worked for me when I was 18 years old, I'd still be drinking it, but alcohol stopped working for me, so I don't drink it anymore. And the sad news in my life is alcohol stopped working for me about 10 years before I realized it stopped working for me, and I hurt a lot of people. Because I'm not a nice guy, I'm an evil guy, and I'm not a spiritual guy. You know what I am? I'm the material girl of Alcoholics Anonymous. Who's that, Lady Gaga? Who's the Madonna? Madonna? I don't know this stuff. I'm the Madonna of Alcoholics Anonymous. Oh, you're a material man? Put your hand right here. Let me hit it with a hammer, see how you feel about that. We'll see how material you are. So the first step in getting out of jail is you got to know you're in jail in the first place. Knowing you're in jail with the alcohol is the easiest part. Because, hey, listen, they don't arrest you for driving while feeling sorry for yourself. They don't arrest you for driving while lusting. They arrest you for driving while drunk. You get the drunk thing pretty fast. You know what I mean? Your life starts falling apart, but I'll tell you something. The worrying about what people think about you, the worrying about money, property, and prestige, the stuff they talk about in the sixth step, we don't want to deprecate material achievement. We don't want to say that looking after things and all that is wrong. And then it's a little bait and switch, but then later on down the paragraph they say, but nobody's fucked up their lives more chasing that shit. Money, property, prestige, and yes, ladies, romance. It's right up there with the car. It's right up there with the car. It's the same kind of craving. We just substitute the booze for the man, the booze for the woman, the booze for the money. That's the whole thing. All through the book, it's all about that stuff. But you're not going to hear about it because you don't go to a lot of meetings where they talk like I'm talking. Do you? Do you? You just say things like, man, I've never been in a meeting where they talk about the shit you're talking about. Because people are scared to talk about it. Not because it's not biblical, not because it's not in the AA, not because it's not the truth, but because other people are scared that other people are going to criticize them, and they're stark raving scared about what other people will think about them because they've never experienced the promise of the relief of fear of people's judgment and economic insecurity. And if you can't talk about God and what the Lord has done for you in here, where it's all over the walls and all over the book, you're never going to talk about it out there. And so you're going to live a life of bondage, not to alcohol, but to yourself. And we got to find a power by which we can live. And it says, of course, then we're going to talk about God. And here's the problem with alcoholics, because they don't want to talk about that stuff because it's too drastic. And so I get these guys who are slippers, and they come back in, and they say things. I had 5 years and I drank. I had 7 years and I drank. And they come back in and they say, well, now I'm going to really do it. I'm going to really do a good 4-step. I'm going to do a good 5th-step. I'm going to do a good 10-step. I'm going to go to meetings. I'm going to do all that stuff. And I look him in the eye. I said, let me ask something. You had 10 years. Weren't you doing that stuff before you drank when you had 10 years? He said, yeah. Well, weren't you doing that stuff when you had 5 years and then you drank? He says, yeah. But you drank. He says, yeah. I said, how about this? I mean, all that stuff is important. I'm not saying it's not important. But instead of telling me what you did and how you're going to do it again, why don't you and I discuss what you never did? Why don't we discuss because the thing that's killing you is the stuff that you didn't do because it was too drastic. And some guy loaded your mind and told you we don't talk about that stuff because it kills newcomers. No, what's killing newcomers is people who are spiritual agnostics that don't really believe in God. He's not the number one thing in their life, doesn't sit on the throne of their heart, but they're basically agnostics. That's what it is. So the way it's going to go is like this. The meeting's going to be all fun and games for the first 2 or 3 times, just like this has been all fun and games, right? By the way, you guys know about the Alky dog? No? Listen, what is Rule 62? Don't take yourself
too
seriously. Yeah. Listen, don't get all upset about this shit, I take back everything I just said. I take it all back. I'm going to be driving back home and say, why the fuck did I say that shit? Disturb people. I don't believe that shit at all, you know what I mean? Yeah, just forget about it. Don't worry about it. So I was driving down the street, and I saw a sign, talking dog for sale. So I don't know about you, I figured, I know it's bullshit, but I figured I'd stop. There's some old guy there in the car. I said, I see you got a sign, talking dog for sale. He says, yeah. I said, you got a dog that talks? He said, yeah. A talking dog? He says, yeah. He says, well, can I go see it? He says, sure. He's in the back. He's in the back. Just go in the back. He's there. So I walk in the back, true story. I walk in the back, and there's this dog, little mutt, like in a cage. And I walk up to him and I say, the cage has Max on it. So I say, are you Max? And the dog looks at me and says, yeah, I'm Max. I'm the talking dog. I said, I cannot. You're talking. He says, yeah, I talk. I've been talking ever since I'm a pup. And I said, I can't believe this. He says, yeah. He says, man, and nobody knows about it. He says, yeah, there's a few people that know about it. He says, I used to work for the CIA. My owner was one of the guys in the KGP, before the SFP all the way back then. I spent 10 years with this guy in the
KGB.
Yeah, thank you. And he used to bring me to meetings in the Kremlin, and I'd be there, and I'm a dog, nobody gives a shit, I'm a dog, and I would hear all the stuff they were talking about, and then I had a handler CIA guy, and I would go and I would tell him all the secrets that I learned in the Kremlin. And I did that for 10 years, and then I retired, and I came over to the States, and I worked for Dow Chemical in industrial espionage. And, he might take me over to DuPont, you know what I mean? And I'd sit in all their meetings in Monsanto, and then come back, and I'd tell all that. I did that for about 10 years, and now I'm retired. I don't do that anymore, But I was involved in covert operations and things like that. I said, holy shit, they ought to do a movie on this. He says, yeah, they're gonna do it. They're doing a screenplay right now. They're gonna do a movie, and I'm like freaking out. I can't believe this shit. You talk about miracles, So I say, well, I have a house down the street. I have some grandkids and stuff. I mean, would you like to live with me? I mean, he says, sure, yeah, I'd love to, no problem. And then just talk to my owner, And so I go up to the front of the, and I say, I'd like to buy Max. He says, sure, no problem. So I said, well, how much is he? He says, just like the sign says, $10. I said, $10? He says, yeah, $10. I said, what? Is it a talking dog? He says, yeah, a talking dog. I said, the sign says $10. And he says, you're actually the first guy that actually stopped. And he says, I said, how can you sell a talking dog for $10? And he says, he's a fucking liar. He never did any of that shit. None of it. It was an alky dog. God bless you. Thank you.